Well, good evening. I'd like to call to order the Regional Planning Commission Wednesday, February 13th, 2019 edition, and would like to start with roll call, please.
Frank Peterson. Present. James Fewens. Here. Shelley Reed for Diane Vanderwell. Here. James Barnes. Here. Sarah Chavilicek.
Here.
Larry Chesney.
Here.
Ed Hawkins. Here. Kevin Weisky.
Here.
And Peter Gower.
Here. Thank you. We will move on to item number 2, salute to the flag. And I will ask Commissioner Barnes to lead us this evening. Would you join me, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 3, approval of the agenda. Looking for a motion. Commissioner Peterson.
I move that we approve the agenda as read. There's no alterations.
Commissioner Weisky, second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. We will move on to item number 4, public comment. This is general public comment. Damien, do we have some requests to speak?
Yes, I have 2, Danny Cleus, and after that will be Denise Ross.
Thank you.
Okay.
Danny Cleus for the record. Everybody says we need to keep on going the way we've been going. Well, it's been proven over and over again by engineers, scientists, and everybody else. You keep filling in stuff, your buildings are going to be underwater, just like they have been for years here. The Truckee River used to feed all the fields in the south area of Reno with fertile ground. That's why it was there. It's always drained that way. Lemon Valley, keep building, keep filling. We're there now. 3 winters in a row right now, almost 2 years. There we are, still there. The government, this local government, keep saying, we need to continue the way we are. Keep continuing to that. Us as residents, we didn't make that mess. But us residents are cleaning that mess up. We are paying for that. Why should we? Our local government should be paying for that out of their own pockets. As regional, you guys should be looking at this. Yeah, it's sort of cute, it's cartoonish. But it's not cute living in this every year. Going on number 3 years for Lemon Valley. But building continues and continues and continues. Why? You ought to see the storm runoff coming from the Lemon Valley area versus what's around Lemon Valley. It's nasty. This morning, I was at the City of Reno Council meeting. I invited all of them to come out and visit our mess again. Not to do it in the sunshine, not to do it a month from now, in the next couple days. We are having a normal winter, and that lake is already over its boundaries again. And it's only February, beginning of February. We still have March and April to go. What's going to happen then? Something needs to be changed within the regional planning to make sure that our local governments don't do this anymore. It's not good. My house went from not being in the floodplain to 4 feet in the floodplain. Thank you.
Next up, we have Denise Ross, and then after that is Wesley Griffin.
Denise Ross. I just want to show you guys what was on our way here tonight. This is one of the three main tributaries flowing into Swan Lake. Oops, sorry. One of the three flowing into Swan Lake. One of the three flowing into Swan Lake. And 2.3 million gallons of water effluent per day going into Swan Lake. What are you guys gonna do? There's no more room. You want to see other pictures? I'll show you what it's like driving in here. Yeah, Lemon Drive. That's our life. Sorry, I wanted to get the part where yeah, this is the part that shows where we have to drive through the water. Oh, same thing. Sorry. I'm working on it, you guys. I'm trying. Okay, got it. That's Arkansas. Arizona. Sorry. We had dinner before we came. There's the water. So we were in a big truck. If we're in a little car and you're passing, there's two cars going the same direction. Somebody can't see, different directions. Somebody can't see. Oh, God. Anyway, that's enough pictures.
Thank you.
And last one for this item is Wesley Griffin.
Good evening. My name is Wesley Griffin. I have been coming to various meetings, some of yours included, speaking about saving Wild Creek. We are very much in favor of the Truckee Meadows Regional Plan being amended to include looking at schools as projects of regional significance. And I think this is a very good example of why that needs to be done. Back in 2017, I think in May, the public governments, different local governments came together and voted to look at determining whether Wild Creek would be a good place to put a school. Interestingly enough, there's 300 or 400 people that live in our area that was the very first we heard of it. Interestingly enough, people that sit on the RSCVA board and were very much in tune to what was going on. Actually, the city councilman of that area never heard anything about it before it was announced publicly in May of 2017. This was something that was very much of a regional public, it was should very much been considered a project of regional significance. For one thing, they were introducing something into an existing neighborhood that was going to very much change the character of our neighborhood. Another thing too, one of the basic goals and reasons for having a regional plan, one of the basic goals is to maintain our recreational areas, green spaces, and open spaces. Why do we, when we have all the land around that we do today, have to begin to cannibalize our public parks to do that? Think of your favorite public park, and what if the school district came in and wanted to put a school there? You know, we hear all the time in the news about the Washoe County School District being concerned about bullying within the schools. What about the Washoe County School District bullying the citizens, many of which voted for WC1? And then they turn around and take their $1 million budgets to bully the citizens and take away their recreational areas. This really does need to be reviewed. Thank you.
Thank you. Damien, any other comments on this item?
I have none.
Okay. We will move on then to item number 5A, which is business of the day, regional plan conformance review for the 2040 RTP. Chris, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Tolley, TMRPA for the record. The case before you is a regional plan conformance review for the 2040 Regional Transportation Plan Amendment 1, case number CR 18-022. The proposal is an amendment to the 2040 RTP, or Regional Transportation Plan, to incorporate Phase 1 of the Nevada Department of Transportation's Reno Spaghetti Bowl Improvement Project for the 2017-2021 timeframe. The RTC, I passed over some of it. I'll read this portion. RTC has identified and incorporated additional amendments, and the primary ones are shown here and described in the following slides. Other changes include shifts in estimated implementation time for some projects and eliminating redundancies and inconsistencies on NDOT freeway projects since more information has become available. And that was supposed to be this slide, but we're going to detail these points on the following slides. So I'll go back. And the Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County, or RTC, as the designated metropolitan planning organization for Washoe County, is required to develop and update the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP. The RTP is a long-range planning document that contains public transportation, street and highway, bicycle, pedestrian, traffic system management, and travel demand management projects and services. For reference, the 2040 RTP was found to be in conformance with the 2012 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan on September 13, 2017. So for additional context about the proposed amendment, here are the amendment components as they appear in the 2017-2021 timeframe and will follow with the 2022 and 2026 timeframe. The Spaghetti Bowl Express Project, Phase 1, and associated updates to the phasing and project limits of freeway improvements identified in the RTP. Lemon Drive widening from Arkansas Street to Chickadee Drive and associated flood mitigation measures, including raising the road base of Lemon Drive. South Virginia Street safety and multimodal improvements from Arrow Creek Parkway south to the I-580 interchange. And West 4th Street enhanced sidewalks, bike lanes, and intersection improvements from Evans to Keystone Avenue. And then moving on again to the 2022-2026 timeframe, again, Lemon Drive widening, North Virginia Street widening from Stead Boulevard to Panther Drive. Oops. Additional southbound travel lanes and both northbound and southbound auxiliary lanes on US 395 between McCarran Boulevard and Lemon Drive. And then the final piece of timing, The unfunded vision for transit identifies projects that have varying degrees of high capital and operating costs. The amendment also adds the extension of the Lincoln Line bus rapid transit route from the Reno Transit Center out to the Keystone Avenue on West 4th Street to the unfunded vision for transit. The Lincoln Line currently runs between the transit centers and Reno and Sparks along along 4th Street and Prater Way. And then on to the review criteria. Policy 4.1.3 of the regional plan identifies 6 factors that the RPC must consider, which are listed on this slide. The 2040 RTP, Amendment 1, addresses safety priorities, improves existing infrastructure, and provides multimodal improvements. These changes are expected to provide enhanced service to the region and are consistent with the policies applicable to the RTP. Finally, in relation to the goals and policies of the regional plan, regional planning staff has not identified any significant performance issues and recommends approval of the proposal based on consistency and/or compatibility with the review factors listed in this policy. You can find the suggested motion on the screen or on page 6 of your packet. This does conclude staff's presentation. TMRPA, RTC, and RTCA staff are available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Damien, do we have any public comments on this item?
I have none for this specific item.
Okay, anyone wishing to make a public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I will bring it back to the commission for questions. If no
Mr. Chairman.
question- Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you. I think this is a question for RTC. And my question is, the improvements being proposed to the spaghetti bowl, are those designed to meet the needs of the projected growth at 2040, or are they less than that?
Thank you. Amy Cummings with RTC.
Nice
Yes.
to see you again, Amy.
You too. NDOT has used a 20-year projection, so they are for the forecast design is for the 2040 traffic projections.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for RTC or regional planning staff? If not, I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the case of CR 18-022, I move to find the 2040 Regional Transportation Plan Amendment 1 in conformance with the 2012 Truckee Meadows Regional Plan based on the findings listed in the staff report, and I can make all of those findings.
Thank you very much. Have a
Commissioner
motion?
Chesney, second.
What, he beat you to it, Commissioner Peterson.
No arguments.
Okay. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. We will move on then to item 5B. Chris, welcome back.
Good evening again, Commissioners. Chris Tolley, Team RPA for the record. The item before you is an opportunity to review and provide comment to the Regional Planning Governing Board on their amendment to the Wild Creek Utility Corridor Regional Plan Amendment. This is case number RPA 18-002. So a little overview and background. On September 12, 2018, the RPC voted to approve Resolution 18-04, which recommended adoption of the original proposed amendment to the RPGB, and that vote was unanimous. For reference, the originally proposed amendment sought to relocate the existing corridor approximately 940 feet north of the existing corridor location on the Wild Creek Golf Course. And this map shows the originally proposed amendment, again, relocating the existing corridor approximately 940 feet north. The dashed teal color represents the relocated corridor location, and the dashed gold represents the removed corridor. So on December 6, 2018, the Regional Planning Governing Board voted to amend the proposal for the subject case adding a utility corridor and maintaining the existing corridor, and remanded it back to the RPC for review and comment. The RPGB also voted to include a limitation that if the new additional regional utility corridor is not occupied within 2 years from the date the amendment is approved by the RPGB, the new regional utility corridor will be abandoned. And then this map represents the amended proposal. The request as amended by the RPGB adds utility corridor in the same location as the requested relocation and maintains the existing corridor, again, which is shown on this map. The proposed added utility corridor here is shown in the dashed purple color. And then for reference, here is the aerial showing the RPG's recommended change. So the RPC is being asked to review and provide comment on the RPGB's amendment to the original proposal. Again, adds utility corridor in the same location as the requested relocation and maintains the existing corridor, and includes a 2-year limitation that if the new additional regional utility corridor is not occupied within the date the amendment is approved by the RPGB, the new regional utility corridor would be abandoned or will be abandoned. And then to cover the review criteria, the regional plan requires a regional plan amendment for the removal of existing corridors or creation of new corridors. Furthermore, policy 4.3.6 of the regional plan identifies 6 factors that the Regional Planning Commission and Regional Planning Governing Board must consider, which are listed on this slide. As noted in the staff report, regional planning staff has reviewed the criteria in this policy and offers that the original analysis, again as presented in the September 12, 2018 RPC staff report, would not change with the addition of a corridor versus the relocation. For reference, staff's analysis found that there was no significant impact likely to result from the original proposal in regards to policy 4.3.6. And then on to the suggested motions. And so you have the opportunity, again, to provide comment to the RPGB as indicated in these motions, and the amendment does not require approval by the RPC. You can find the suggested motions on the screen or on page 63 of your packet. This does conclude staff's presentation. TMRPA staff are available for any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Damien, any public comments on this item?
Yes, I have 3 for this item. First is John Hesse, and then after that will be Darlene Hesse.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Hesse, and it's pretty daunting up here. I'm a proponent of keeping the high school out of the Wild Creek area, and along with trying to keep the high school out of it, these power lines, I guess the cost of the power line to go ahead and relocate it will be borne by the school district because they're the ones that are requesting it be done. And I hope that they have some deep pockets because it's probably a pretty expensive transaction. Along with the power lines and the expensive transaction, my concern is to even build a high school in the Wild Creek Golf Course. Kind of get off the subject here, but I only have a couple of minutes left, so with the golf course now being managed by a group of individuals that I understand they're doing quite a good job on it, making some money with it. People coming into the area, a lot of them are going to be playing golf. If we do lose this course, it's very, very expensive to build another one. So I would really urge you to take a good look at this from an overall greenbelt master plan and some of the other plans that you folks are much more familiar with than I am, but that you really use some due diligence and make sure that this is something that we do want to get involved in, and that we do want to do, and that would work out good for all the people here in the valley. I thank you again very much for your time.
Thank you.
Next up, I have Darlene Hesse, and then last will be George Lee.
Well, good evening, everyone. I don't even know if I signed up for the right area to talk, but I have pictures that I took today of the flooding on Wild Creek Golf Course. I'm very concerned about it, and it's going to run down. Washoe County has no idea of the expense that you people are going to be involved. We're all going to be involved in a very expensive thing. I do not understand why a $32 million money-making property is going to be torn down and replaced with a boondoggle billion-dollar project. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. I see all the guys, 2018, when Duncan took it over, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe the golfers that were there. And they were all saying what a wonderful golf course, and it was just kind of like it was before. And they're making money, and I heard that they even had a $1 million profit, and $600,000 was paid to Washoe County or to RSCVA. I don't know how true that is, but I don't know why you would take a golf course down with 60,000 people came in last year, and there's many more people coming in. I'm not a golfer, but I'm a lover of this land, and I've lived there 40 years, and I watch the traffic every morning. It's bumper to bumper, bumper to bumper. When you put this school in and 2,000 kids are coming in, it's going to be standstill traffic, I'm telling you. You better really look at it. And I have pictures here that maybe afterwards I could show people. It's almost, if it keeps raining, it will be running over Whittican Road. We have a major, it's a flood area. It's a floodplain. You should never build on a floodplain. Now, haven't you learned from Lemon Valley? Haven't you learned? Haven't you learned from Texas, Dallas, Texas? Don't build on a floodplain. This is a money-making project, the golf course, and it should just be improved. It's been, if I was a golfer, I would have been complaining to that RSCVA. They did not do a damn thing for that golf course except take the money from it, as far as I'm concerned. There's a lot of things that are wrong over there. And this is a project that started really on April 26th. We went to a meeting at Hug High School, not May, not the one that was up in Sun Valley. And my husband and I found out about it accidentally. And here's this map on Whittican, and the baseball fields are right on Whittican. Baseball fields, it was just unbelievable. So we never, ever got one notice of anything of this project. It's unbelievable what is going on. I think there's a law against what's happening here. It doesn't seem right that you're going to take this beautiful property, and there are a lot of beautiful animals there, and tear it down and put this dang school on there. This school is important, but not there. Thank you.
George Lee, for the record. Is this on? Yes, it is. Okay. I want to
Can you
thank
say your name again? I didn't
Yeah,
catch
George
that.
Lee.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to thank you guys for maintaining your high standards as to what you accept as regional areas of, you know the word. It's like, sorry. Because if you don't maintain those high standards and you decide, well, we're just going to raise the limit on this one so that the school district can build their school or whatever. And it doesn't have to do with a school, it just has to do with changing your standards so that some people can do certain projects. Your standards were thought out and set for a reason. Somebody spent a lot of time coming up with your standards. And I want to thank you for maintaining those. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have no further public comment for this item.
Okay, anyone else wishing to make a public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we will bring it back to the commission for questions, please. Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris? Just for the record and for public information, because I read through my packet, I didn't see anything about approval for a high school or any other structure in tonight's agenda item. Am I correct, or did I miss something?
You're correct, yes. This is the review and comment for the RPGB's amendment to the original proposal.
Okay, so this is just for the relocation of a power line. It doesn't have to happen. NV Energy could decide to relocate this power line and nothing could ever get built on the property, even after it's been relocated, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. No more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other questions? I have a question for legal counsel. Jessica, if I could ask you just to summarize, there's a letter in our packet that you and Norm directed towards the governing board back in December, summarizing the rationale for keeping both corridors. And it related to a situation of creating nonconformance if we move forward with a relocation versus keeping both corridors.
Could you direct me to the page of the packet, Mr. Chairman?
That is on page 111, I believe, of the packet.
So when this amendment originally came up to the RPGB, or to this body, you recommended approval for the relocation of the regional utility corridor to the RPGB. When it came up to the RPGB the first time, it did not pass by a simple majority of the entire governing board. Then they reconsidered the item in the December meeting. Prior to that reconsideration, what had been, when the record was examined, what was discovered was that there was not a corresponding project to move the lines to the proposed relocated location. And without that corresponding project, the governing board in December decided to amend the proposed amendment to add an additional utility corridor instead of relocating the utility corridor, so that we would not have existing lines in the ground outside of a designated utility corridor. So then we have, if this passes the RPGB when it goes back at their meeting tomorrow, we would have an additional utility corridor without lines, the existing utility corridor that still has the lines, and then presumably when those lines, the project for those lines is brought forward, then the existing corridor will get abandoned through a mapping amendment, and then the new corridor will become occupied. If that does not happen within 2 years of approval of that amendment, then the new utility corridor will be extinguished.
And the existing utility corridor that the
stay.
line is in
Yes.
stays.
Yes, so the concern was that there would be lines in the ground without a utility corridor if it was relocated versus adding a new one. And then the reason why it's back to you guys is that under Nevada statutes, whenever the RPGB makes an amendment to something that you put up to them for a regional plan amendment, then it has to come back to the RPC for their review and comment. And you may or may not have comment, but we are following the statutes.
Okay. Thanks very much for that summary. That helped me.
That helped me a lot,
Yep.
immensely.
Any other questions? If not, how about a motion of recommendation to the RPGB? Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the case of RPA 18-002, I move to confirm that the RPC has reviewed the amended original proposed Wild Creek amendment to maps 9 through 11 of the 2012 regional plan as detailed in this staff report, and have no comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a motion, do I have a second? Commissioner Peterson?
Go ahead.
Chairman, I'd like to second that, please.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. We will move on then to item 5C, which is a presentation regarding guidelines for a project of regional significance. Lauren, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Lauren Knox with Regional Planning. This agenda item discusses the Project of Regional Significance Guidelines. So you may remember this item from back in January. To provide some brief context, the Regional Planning Governing Board directed staff to bring an item before this body regarding the potential amendment of the Project of Regional Significant Guidelines, which is an authority that the Nevada Revised Statutes gives to the Regional Planning Commission. At the January RPC meeting, the RPC provided feedback and discussion to direct staff to begin drafting a new resolution. There were also some specific questions posed at the meeting that staff would like to provide a quick update on. The items needing clarification involve the existing 325 student threshold and also an understanding of what would be reviewed when looking at a project of regional significance, specifically the findings. So in terms of the clarification regarding the existing student population threshold, I'm actually going to turn it over to legal counsel.
Jessica Prenti for the record. Thank you, Lauren. At the last meeting in January, this commission had questions regarding the meaning of the existing 325 student population threshold trigger for a PRS. The past practice of the agency is to interpret the threshold to encompass a project that resulted in an increase in new students, not a school with a student population of more than 325 students. But in light of the questions from this commission, I conducted further research into the history of where that student population threshold originated, because it's one of the few thresholds that's not specifically set forth in Nevada statutes. So prior to 2005, one of the subsections of NRS 278026, which defines projects of regional significance, defined PRSs to include projects identified by this body in their guidelines as having a significant effect on natural resources, public services, and public facilities. Then in 2005, the legislature amended that definition to specifically include schools as public facilities. So what the legislature was wanting to do was to enable this body, or clearly make it set forth their authority to adopt a guideline that would encompass projects that would have a significant impact upon school facilities themselves. So a development type of project, right? In reaction to that legislative change in 2005, the 2005 legislative change, the RPC amended its guidelines in 2006 and added the 325 student population trigger. The thresholds for triggers for water, sewer, and traffic are all derived off of the 625 housing unit threshold. That's an extrapolation using known factors to get to those numbers. The RPC took a similar approach in the student population trigger. They worked with the school district and used the school district's factor of 0.52 students per household, basically, and then times that by the 625 units to come up with a 325 student population number. The RPC discussions leading to the adoption of the student population threshold made it pretty clear that the addition of the student population threshold was intended to encompass development projects that affected school facilities, not target the construction of schools with a population of 325 students or more. And what was interesting in conducting this research is that this is not a new conversation. In 1996, the PRS guidelines at that time actually included very specific types of projects as PRSs, including a project that is a capital improvement program of the Washoe County School District. In 2004, The RPC amended the guidelines to remove some of the specific types of projects, including capital improvement projects of the district. When it did so, the agency staff reported to the RPC that that guideline had come about due to a disagreement with the district in the early 90s regarding their facilities plans, which had been since resolved. And then the staff stated in their staff report that a school facility which would have a regional impact, such as a high school, would most likely trigger one of the other PRS thresholds, such as water, traffic, or sewer. The discussion popped again in 2009, and I thank Mr. Etchart for bringing this to our attention, in the context of RTC's concerns about the siting of schools on arterial roads. And the outcome of that conversation, after conversation with all agencies, including the district, was that we didn't think conformance review of schools as PRSs was the correct solution at the time, and it chose instead to adopt the regional plan policies under Goal 3.7 that are in your plan now. And that record reflects that it was the belief that those new policies and the creation of a school facilities plan would substantially increase interagency coordination and communication for future school planning within the TMSA and avoid school land use and transportation planning conflicts. And so there's the legal historical perspective for you, and with that, I return it back to Lauren.
All right, so to go back over the review criteria, you can see the review criteria for projects of regional significance overhead. I'm going to walk us through each of those criteria in terms of what it is that we generally be analyzing when looking at a project of regional significance. I want to note, though, that the factors may change with the regional plan update. The policies are going to be a little bit different. The review factors might be different, but I'm going to be looking at it as if we were working with today's regional plan, because that's what we have to go off of. So in regards to regional form and pattern, what we're really looking at is the site in the TMSA, and is that use allowed within that portion of the TMSA? Generally, schools would be allowed in any portion of the TMSA. In terms of development constraints, we're looking to see if any portion of the site is considered a development constraint area. So that includes areas with slopes over 30%, publicly owned open space, AE floodways, playas, jurisdictional waters or wetlands, significant water bodies, and properties that are deed restricted to prevent development. We also generally acknowledge any other natural resource impacts that may occur. In terms of infill housing and the jobs housing balance, it's really looking at compatibility with the surrounding development and what those impacts to housing or infill would really be. Item 4 is about public services and infrastructure, so we're really looking at the availability of services and infrastructure to serve the site, as well as the impacts to public services and facilities. So this includes regional items such as water, wastewater, and traffic. For military installations, we're looking at the compatibility of development with military installations if a project is within a certain distance of a military installation. And this is really based on comments and feedback we receive from the military installation if it's in that buffer area. And in terms of cumulative impacts, they're actually a little bit difficult to review at this point in time, but it's something that we're really attempting to get at with the regional plan update as well. But generally, what we would be looking at is the additional impacts that might be brought forward through the review process, so anything else that's kind of brought to our attention. So a potential option that staff considered is modeling a school PRS threshold off of an existing threshold regarding places of employment. So as you can see overhead, the existing PRS threshold for employment is 938 employees. Staff believes this item is most closely comparable in function in that large employers also host a significant number of people in one location, which as do schools. Additionally, it was brought up that we may only want to consider certain schools a PRS when they're anticipated to be developed in an existing neighborhood. Wording to that effect could also be included if wanted. And for the rest, I'm actually going to turn it over to Executive Director Robinson.
Thanks very much, Lauren. So in terms of the conversation since your last Planning Commission meeting, which was a couple of weeks ago, TMRPAS staff has identified the need for a couple of things, including understanding what the impacts to schools would be in regards to the existing thresholds and potential changes. We also want to understand the implications of the creation of an additional PRS guideline on schools. Certainly, we have some research done by our legal counsel. And finally, we would like the opportunity to be able to work with Washoe County School District staff regarding this conversation. Now, we did have a conversation with the school district last week and identified a meeting time that we can meet next week to continue to work on this. But in terms of being able to craft policy, one of the things that I think staff is identifying here is we would like to be able to look at some of these other pieces to ensure that we provide some good policy around this. And I think part of what we will be looking for from the Planning Commission this evening is a conversation around if you'd like to see us move forward with that. And also, it would be helpful to discuss the timeframe within which there's an expectation and how that fits with the update that we're talking about now. And if there's that rolls in or, anything like that. So I think we'd appreciate any feedback like that. With that, I think the three of us are available for any questions.
Okay, thanks very much for that presentation. I think before we get to that discussion, we'll pause and see if there's any public comment on the item. Damien, do we have any?
Yes, I have 4 this evening. First will be Mike Brierly, and then after that, Kim Tracy.
Good evening. My name's Mike Brierly. I'm really encouraged that you folks are looking at this review. I was encouraged at some of the staff's comments. I think where we are and where we're going with this might be very fruitful. I see the city of Sparks is going to be faced with issuing a building permit. And I would think that if the Planning Commission could review some of the particulars of Well Creek, it might be beneficial not only to the community but the city of Sparks in this final process. We're encouraged that the school district has moved the school to the north. The consequence of moving that power line is substantial. It's probably going to cost more to move that power line than buy the property and the water rights. So I'm glad the community is looking at this. I think you're doing a good job. I've been here a long time. I used to be an engineer with the city of Sparks. I'm glad that you folks are looking at this. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Next up is Kim Tracy, and then after that is Gail Miller.
Hi, I'm Kim Tracy, and I would like to encourage this board or commission to definitely consider schools' PRCs, or PRSs, I'm sorry. Not only should they be PRSs, but they should definitely be added stipulations when the schools are being planted in the middle of pre-existing, fully developed neighborhoods or parks or green spaces, because it's having a major effect on those of us that are in that area. And while that may seem like a small group, if it can happen to us, it can happen to you. And maybe being on this commission makes you feel a little safer that it won't happen in your neighborhood, but it could. If this were addressed early on, then possibly none of this would be happening with the school being placed in the Wild Creek area. And I know you want us to defer from not speaking about the Wild Creek area, but I just drove down from there, and the golf course is well on its way to being pretty well flooded again. There's water well exceeding the pond edges. Can it be mitigated? Of course it can, at a great expense, I'm sure. And moving power lines, I'm not sure if it's the same as building and remodeling, but usually it's easier to put up new things than to remodel and move pre-existing things and less expensive. So I think these are all things that need to be considered. And having a school PRS is definitely something that's important. For those of you that aren't being directly affected by this particular incident, I'd like you to keep in mind that those who are being affected. It's a pretty major, horrible thing that's happening over there. You know, I live up off of High Rock Way, which is well behind the golf course, and I don't think there is a high school student within miles of my home. So when I purchased that property 4 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, it was important to me that it was by a golf course, that it was behind an open space, and that I have a job where my response time to work is within 30 minutes. And if you've ever driven down McCarran at any of the heavy traffic times, you'll see that it's not unusual to have major collisions at the intersections of Wedekind and McCarran, Sullivan and McCarran. So I think that having several hundred new drivers added to the mix should make it pretty exciting. I don't know that I would be able to make it to my place of employment in 30 minutes at that point. It's already horrific in the morning. So I would really like you to strongly consider this. It sounds like as though you are. We appreciate that you're doing this. And would, you know, really be considerate of the fact that placing something in a pre-developed, fully developed area where you're going to be busing in the majority of the students, they're not going to be walking to school, seems a little crazy to those of us who are there, and hopefully to the other people in the community who we represent that just don't have the wherewithal to come out and speak with you. Thank you.
Next up is Gail Miller, and then after that is Kathleen Shupp.
Good evening, Gail Miller, Sparks, Nevada. I read through the agenda packet at home online, and I didn't see anything on the presentation that was presented here, so I didn't have any specifics to go on. So I'm just speaking in general that I feel like this body does need to carefully craft an amendment regarding the parameters of which certain schools would be defined as projects of regional significance. Schools are major projects that affect the whole community, students, parents, faculty, and also the surrounding community, as well as community that would travel through that area. High schools, I believe, at the very least, should be defined as projects of regional significance, and I believe that you should look at middle school populations and even large elementary schools. My grandchildren go to a very large elementary school, which is often around a population of 1,000. There's only one way in and out, and the buses don't go very far, or they go way far away from the schools, so most of the parents have to pick up the kids and take them. I think that could have been looked at, and maybe traffic or something could have been designed better. So large population elementary schools, I think, should be looked at also. I think this is the body that should oversee schools that would be defined as projects of regional significance, and I thank you.
Next up is Kathleen Shupp, and then Rich Lawler.
Good evening. I'm Kathleen Shupp, and I do live in the Wild Creek area. I'm very fearful of that high school going in, and I think that all high schools should be treated as projects of regional significance. One of the reasons for that is the increased noise level that we're going to have to experience with the marching bands. I really dread that day if it should happen. But another thing is that I have looked up some statistics on crime rates. I didn't bring it with me. There are a lot of numbers, but the crime rates really go up high in areas of high schools. And we're talking about a neighborhood that this high school is going to be dropped on us. All of us are in advanced ages, where a lot of us are retired. We're considered soft targets. Please realize that bringing people into our area is a threat to our well-being. And thank you very much.
Next up is Rich Lawler, then last but not least is George Lee.
Hello, thank you for letting me take the time to speak to you. My name is Rich Lawler. I'm for Wild Creek Golf Course. I'm an avid golfer. I love that golf course. I'm all for a new school. I know we need it. This particular location for the school doesn't make sense to me because, I mean, nobody really knows how many students going to hold right now. I don't believe. They say 2,600 students. Hug High has 1,300 students. Build this school, 1,300 students come in from Hug. That leaves 1,300 more to come in from Spanish Springs. Well, in 2 years, there's going to be 4,000 to 6,000 more homes built out in the Spanish Springs area. So by the time the school's built, it's going to get full again. Spanish Springs is going to be full again. So how is this fixing the overcrowding problem in Spanish Springs? The way the growth is going and everything, that's okay, that's one thing. Washoe County has no definite plans on what's going on. I mean, the school district, is there anything solid? Everything's a drawing right now. There's nothing definite. And now you guys are talking about buying a property and giving, or the school district's talking about buying a property and they're going to have this property. Well, if that's going to happen, you better put a limitation on that and make sure it is a school. If it's not a school, nothing else should get built there. Why waste this beautiful piece of property that can be profitable and will be profitable? This school that they're talking about, location-wise, to me, is ludicrous. Traffic studies. Has there been traffic studies? Does anybody know? I mean, legitimate traffic studies. You're talking about, now you said 0.5 children per household, is that correct? Like it's a half a child per household? Really? You're talking 4,000 homes out in Spanish Springs, do you think that's only 2,000 kids? No. All I'm trying to ask you people is please pay attention and make sure the school district is showing you facts, legitimate facts on what they're gonna do, what it's gonna cost. Because I'll tell you right now that the media is saying $200 million project. They don't even know that. That's probably the cost just to build the building. And it might be like Sun Valley where they built a building for $30 million, but they forgot about putting the cost of the furniture in. I'm just saying, as a Washoe County citizen, taxpayer, trust level is pretty low with the school district right now. And I'm asking you people, you're a lot of smart people, and you're doing a great job, make sure it's written in concrete exactly what they're going to do. Because if not, everybody's spinning their wheels and wasting their time, and you're going to waste a beautiful piece of property. Thank you again for your time.
And last I have for this item is George Lee.
George Lee, once again. I want to thank you for your explanation of the 325 student limit before it gets considered as for review. You know, when this first came out, Mr. Etchart said that this is only part of the project, that we're going to change the high school at Hug, we're going to rebuild that, we're going to revamp the way the schools are, and we're going to build this high school. My point is that the student limit is going to be violated because within the next 4 years, they plan on rebuilding Hug and with bringing back the students they're going to have moved over to Wild Creek, that it's all one project, and you should consider it as one project. In item A, you considered the RTC's project of doing all of these different areas where they were going to widen roads and change the way things were, you know, change the way that the structure of the traffic was in order to relax the traffic patterns a little bit, which, by the way, I think is misguided. However, that's another item on the agenda. But my point is that this is all one project, that they plan on doing this to readjust where the students are. But you think the students that increase in some other place or that come to increase at Wild Creek, it's just a trick to get you to accept that 325 limit, because they are going to have an additional 1,000 students somewhere by the time these schools open. And they're all connected. They're all part of the same project. Please consider that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other requests to speak on this item?
I have none.
Anyone else wishing to make a public comment? Please come up to the podium, state your name, and then fill out a request to speak form with Damien afterwards, please. Yes, when you're done.
Yeah.
Thanks.
My name is Jerry Schroeder. I'm a third-generation Nevadan, second-generation Reno. And I remember when the golf course was built, Mr. Capurro sold the land to Mr. Forty, who donated it to the county under the stipulation that it remain open land. The deeded land always remain open and nothing be built on it. My question would be, how are you guys getting around that in the first place? And the second place is, the RC ran that place terribly. They're saying they lost money. Well, they lost money because of their creative accounting is why they lost money. The property can be very profitable in paying taxes to the city of Reno and everything. Another thing is, I don't know if you've thought about it, but it's directly under the flight path of the airport. Now you can say Hug is under Wooster. None of them are directly under the flight path. I mean, you're playing golf out there, you look up, airplanes are 500 feet directly above you. And to put a school there is irresponsible, in my opinion. You know, wipe out a whole generation of students. Air traffic isn't flawless. You know, accidents happen all the time. And to put a high school directly underneath the flight path is irresponsible, if you ask me. So and that's all I want to say. Taking away something from the community that thousands of people enjoy, when there's land to build a high school other places. I mean, it's you know, put it where the kids are, like Mr. Lawler said. You know, you're going to bus them, you're going to build a high school there and bus them all in. It's ridiculous. Anyway, thank you for the time. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. All right, if there's no other public comment on this item, I will bring it back to the commission for questions or discussion on the recommendations that Kim summarized for us. Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may start.
Please.
I don't know whether this is for Kim or for Lauren. Kim, or Lauren, I'll start with you, and if you pass, that's good. We heard that staff is sitting down and talking with Washoe County School District over the next week. May or may not come to a resolution at that meeting. It may require additional meetings. Why would we not want to consider a motion tonight for a continuation of this agenda item until resolution has been brought forward by
Thank you.
staff?
I think she's looking at me. Kim Robinson, for
think
the
so,
record.
too.
Certainly, that is one of the options that is on the table for the Planning Commission. Again, your staff would like the opportunity to be able to speak with the school district, and I agree, it may take more than one meeting to have those conversations. We do believe that it is a good step in an approach to any type of policy development.
Thank you. That's the only question I have right now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yep, Commissioner Tvilichek.
We have to share a microphone.
Oh,
So if I understand it, the recommendation, what we see up here is possible action that we could support the identified needs that staff has suggested.
That is correct.
Thank you.
thank you. Other questions? Discussion? Recommendations, motion? Go ahead, Commissioner Tvilichek. Oh.
Commissioner Peterson had
Oh, Commissioner Peterson, I'm sorry.
You know, I'm amazed at this because this is kind of new to all of us, unfortunately. Now, I really got to state that the staff has done a fabulous job, I think, in the short time they've had to put some kind of guidelines and everything around. But you know, it's a big project, and I need more information. I'd like to sit down. I would suggest that we have, if we defer this, that we should have a meeting among us and staff and have some of the fine tuning of this. For instance, we just touched a minute on compatibility. I've had an awful lot of problems with compatibility in some of these things. I think we should fine tune compatibility more. We should fine tune how they're going to arrive at, in the future, 935 students. We don't see how they're arriving at that. Number one, before I can really exercise on any of those things, I need more explanation. I need to sit down with them, and I need to be schooled on this so we can get it in cement like the gentleman said. That's the best way for me. I recommend that we defer this, and then we sometime and have a luncheon meeting or somewhere where we can be instructed by staff and invite the Washoe County School District and chew this fat over a little bit and see if we can't hit some cement grounds in it.
Good comment, thank you. Any other feedback for staff that will help move forward? Commissioner Fewens.
Yeah, Commissioner Fewens, I would just like to just say that there is already quite a bit of, for projects of reasonable significance, again, to pull out one use out of that and cherry pick it, and for one use for a project of reasonable significance is my personal opinion, a dangerous road to go down. I think the thresholds are there for a reason, and if it meets that threshold, we should see it. And by opening that to go after one use is just a slippery slope that I think should be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional feedback for staff? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the case of RPA 18-002, I make a motion for a continuation of this project until staff can bring us back additional information from their meetings with Washoe County School District regarding projects of regional significance. And with no time constraint on that. I mean, if they get it done in a week, great. If they get it done in a month, so be it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can support that motion.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you to staff for that presentation too. We will move on to item 5C, which is our presentation on the regional plan update. Kim. Excuse me, 5D. Did I say C? D.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Once again, Kim Robinson for the record. And we are very excited to bring forward draft policies to you this evening for the regional plan update. We will be doing a presentation. You're going to have 4 different presenters this evening, just keeping it snappy and exciting for you. And I'm going to stress in this first conversation, let's make sure I know how to use this. Let's talk a little bit about the agenda this evening. So the expectations that we're looking at for this evening's meeting, there's a lot of information to go through tonight. We want to share with you what we've heard about scenario results from our survey. We want to share with you our draft policies, and we want to share with you kind of how we got there, what our thought process was, and also next steps. So to be able to do all of that really well, we would like to do the following. We'd like to walk through policy development and provide that context to you. And then we want to provide you a variety of ways to be able to review the documents and the policies. We are not looking for feedback tonight. If you have some, it's more than welcome. But what we want to make sure is that you have the space and time to be able to do it well. Okay, and so what that'll look like is you'll have the opportunity to provide written comments. You're going to be able to meet with us on comments and questions. Later on in the presentation, I will outline specifically what those options are, and I also sent you an email earlier today. Again, decisions not expected tonight, feedback welcome. And most importantly, we've brought you in early in the policy drafting portion of the conversation because we really understood at our sessions with the planning commissioners that they were very interested in being partners in this. So Here we go. So in terms of the background information, I just kind of want to give a quick reminder of where we left off last time. So you had a joint meeting with the Regional Planning Governing Board and provided us some information on scenarios and evaluation criteria. We took that forward to a community conversation in December. We also rolled out a survey with our amazing MapQuest tool, and we got those results. We closed that February 1st, and we have those results for you this evening. So I'm just going to jump right into what those results were. So you may remember that part of what we talked to you about at your November joint meeting with the governing board was, please give us some priorities around what our region's concerns are as we grow. And what you'll see on the the right-hand side, is the results of the Regional Planning Commission and Governing Board joint meeting, those top concerns. So we're looking at sewage, air quality, land utilization, infill development, and the kind of work, live, play concept. On the left-hand side are the results from our community conversation that we hosted with Truckee Meadows tomorrow on December 5th. So that was a large public meeting where we asked folks to engage. Again, you can see the priorities. So these are the top 5 out of 18 categories. And the reason I brought these out,
Excuse me, Commissioner Weisky, can I interrupt you and ask a question real quick?
I don't know.
Sewage, does that include stormwater runoff?
I believe the language that we used here was sewage, and it did not include stormwater runoff.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, no problem. So the community conversation, top concerns, left-hand side, and what we're really trying to highlight here, everything that is not grayed out, so is in white, is places that the community and the Planning Commission and the Governing Board agreed upon in their top 5 concerns. And I think one of the things we really noticed was how there's a lot of agreement around what folks are concerned about. So moving on, here's something else we also asked at your joint meeting. So we asked you first, what are the priorities for good growth, or how are we going to evaluate that? And you gave us your 5 priorities: land conservation, housing choice, roads and transit, optimizing the old infrastructure, and the work, live, play concept. And then we said, okay, we've provided you with 4 scenarios or potential land use patterns for the future. Please tell us what you think of each of those 4 scenarios. So just a reminder, the classic, the McCarran, the smart greenfield, and the infill, how you think those would perform based on the priorities that you identified. And what you see up above are the results from the survey from MetroQuest. And as you can see, the infill survey, it looks like maybe the yellow, that's what infill is there. Maybe we need to change that. It is a hard color to see, good to know. But the infill definitely received the most number of votes in terms of being able to meet those priorities. And it comes in at a 4.1 average. And then Smart Greenfield was next at a 3.2. McCarran at 3.0, and the classic, or the way that we've done things for the past 20 years or so, came in at a 1.9. Okay? Now it's my turn to turn this over to Planner Knox, and I'll come back to you. I'll be back in a little bit.
All right, thank you. For the record, Lauren Knox with Regional Planning. So as Kim just mentioned, we have provided you with the draft policies tonight. And I want to note again that these are in draft form and are really intended to be a platform for discussion. These policies will be altered based on the comments, feedback, input, everything that we receive from this body, from the Regional Planning Governing Board, and from the Regional Plan Update Working Group, which you may remember consists of our staff working group with local government staff and some affected entity staff. We also will be rolling out these draft policies to other regional partners and stakeholders as part of this process, but we really wanted to bring it to you first. Again, we gathered that the RPC and the Regional Planning Governing Board wanted to be a part of policy development, so we're coming to you early in the early drafts of the policies. Throughout this presentation, we really are only going to highlight the major shifts and changes from policy, and we're going to walk through the entire policy framework at a really high level. The details are provided in the draft policy documents that are at your seat for you to go away with and review. Again, we don't expect you to have a full understanding of the policies and their implications tonight, but in the next few weeks, there will be the opportunity and space for the Regional Planning Commission to meet with staff, go over any questions, comments, feedback that you have at that time. We've also provided some documents to help the RPC members navigate the new policies. So this includes the Nevada Revised Statutes section related to contents of the regional plan and a comparison of the draft new policies to those NRS provisions. So throughout the policy drafting, staff has taken the approach to re-embed the regional plan in the Nevada Revised Statute requirements for the contents of the regional plan. In reviewing our current plan and the Nevada Revised Statutes, we found opportunities to better align the new policies with our NRS requirements. For reference, a significant portion of the current regional plan, though it's still grounded in NRS, was modified by various settlement agreements in 2002 and 2005. Again, the NRS contents for the regional plan are provided as a printout at your spot. In a very general sense, NRS requires that the regional plan contains information regarding population projections, that it limits premature expansion and directs growth back to established areas, that it conserves natural resources, make efficient use of public facilities and service provision, and there is intergovernmental coordination so that we're all working together. Additionally, you're going to see that there's some reference to NRS throughout this presentation. So the regional planning framework for our region, as designated in NRS, is actually really unique. So there's not really any models to go off of for what our policies should look like or what those state-of-the-practice policies really are. So since those aren't available to us, we really have to be kind of pioneers of new policy for regional planning when it comes to our planning framework. In order to develop these new policies, we utilized a variety of inputs to craft a suite of policies, which you have in front of you tonight. These inputs included the current and previous policy language from the regional plan, again, the NRS statutes, the regional form map and all of its data and inputs, and the extensive issues identification exercises that we've gone down with various groups. We also looked at peer plans. So we've separated the policy into 5 elements. So we have a population growth element, the regional form element, public facilities and services, natural resources, and regional coordination. And these elements really closely resemble what NRS states we must discuss in the contents of the regional plan. The upcoming slides are going to highlight, again, those major shifts in policy. We're going to break it down by each of these elements. So for that, for population growth, I'm actually going to turn it over to Jeremy.
Good evening, Jeremy Smith for the record. Population growth, yes, so I've been doing quite a bit of work over the past few years with regard to how many people we can expect to be coming into the region and where those folks might go, and so I'm here to talk about this one. We're going to start with the NRS, grounding us back in NRS. What does the NRS actually say? So NRS 278.0274 subsection 1 says the following: provide the region with a consistent 20-year population and growth projection to plan from, and then ensure the provision of the necessary services and resources to support the projected growth in population, employment, and housing. So we have developed a set of policies to do that. In fact, we've been doing something similar in terms of the existing regional plan, but we have kind of tried to consolidate some of the work we've been doing actually into a chapter of the regional plan itself. That's a big change. And so the idea is that, currently the consensus forecast is a standalone document. You can download it off of our website. Also, the instructions on how we go about preparing it live in another document, the regulations on procedure. And finally, there's reference to the statute and to population in the plan. So again, we wanted to bring all of that right into the plan. And one of the biggest changes that we're proposing is that within the plan itself, we provide the 20-year consensus forecast as we do today. But we also extrapolate that out for 10 additional years so that we provide in the plan 30 years worth of projection. And the reason for that is that our plan update cycles on 5-year cycle that may or may not align with some of the other entities that we ask to use our projections, use them in their planning. So for example, the RTP is one that uses our population projections. They may be 2 or 3 years off of our plan update cycle. So having the full 30 years in there allows them to then basically at any time be able to check in on that and add that projection to their plan. Now, things change, right? And 5 years may seem like a long time before we go in there and start to change, the outlook of our community. Maybe there's a recession, or maybe the opposite happens and we have even an uptick in growth. So we're also planning, as part of the regional plan update, an annual report, the Truckee Meadows annual report. So we will do a kind of an informal, for the report, population projection annually. And if we see, so that's actually better than we're doing now. Right now, we do it every 2 years. If we see a significant deviation from what's in the plan, then we'll go through a regional plan amendment process to update the projection in the plan. And what that will cause, it will trigger some of what was in the second bullet from the last slide, which is ensuring the provision of the necessary services and resources. One of the things we always do is take the 20-year population forecast to the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission and Western Regional Water Commission to ensure that the population projection can be supported by identified sustainable water resources. So we would do that at plan adoption with this idea, but then we would also do it if we went in and amended that projection within the plan itself. Furthermore, one of the things that we've also done in the past in the consensus forecast is we have entertained this notion of jurisdictional splits, so that there's some total chunk of population we're forecasting over that 20-year period, and then there's some percent share that's going to go to each of the 3 jurisdictions. Historically, that's been based on, from the state demographer, the historic share of total population. And so there's been some discussion in the past with staff of the different jurisdictions that maybe that's not the best way to be thinking about the future of where housing units and people are going to locate in our community. And so we're proposing in the draft policies a change to that where we look at the total share as one input, but we also look at the past 20 years as a second input, and we look at future capacity as a third input. And then that would, for us, develop really ranges of how much a percent share of that future population any given jurisdiction would potentially have. And we're really working in our modeling to get away from being jurisdictional to doing a regional form sort of approach where we're non-jurisdictional. So we're hoping that, it's still draft, obviously, and we need to discuss it, but that might be a more intelligent way to go about doing that. And finally, we built in also the spatial disaggregation piece, which is something that sort of lived outside the plan again. Now we're enforcing it right in the plan. And that's where we go and do the modeling. For this regional plan update process, we've gone to sort of the hexagon framework. We've made it a little coarser, but for this actual spatial disaggregation of our best guess at the future to provide, we'll go down to the parcel level again, and we'll actually do it annually to be then aggregated to 5-year chunks. For example, the RTP requires that there's 5-year increments of the forecast. So that will be happening as well. So those are some of the major highlights, and the main thing to think is that, or to know, is that we're trying to put this right into the plan itself, so it's no longer disconnected from the regional plan. And then a second thing to consider is that, and I've said this to you guys many times, and of course there are assumptions in this, and it depends on sort of how you slice it, but we have quite a bit of excess capacity within our existing TMSA boundary today, right? If we consider just vacant land, we have upwards of 90 to 100,000 theoretical units that could be turned on through PUDs, through zoning, and through what's recorded and what's happening. Remember that based on the existing 2018 consensus forecast, we think there's a demand for about 43,000 units over the next 20 years to support about 107,000 people coming here. Again, we're going to be looking at it annually to make sure we're tracking that, but we have at least double, if not more, capacity within our existing TMSA. And so that leads us really to the next slide, which is what we're calling the regional form map. Now these are draft maps, and this is our attempt to try to take all of the feedback that we've gotten from all the community conversations, from the scenario work that we did, from the survey input, from your guys' input, right, about how we want to see our region grow in the future. And we've basically created a tiering mechanism for intensification of master planned land use in our region. Lauren is going to go through the specifics of the regional form policies, or some of the changes rather, but just since I made the map, we figured I could start there. This is draft 1, and just very simply, we start from the center moving out. The 3 colors in the center are what we're calling the core area, and that is really made up of mixed use in blue, so that would be where we have our traditional mixed use zoning today. Then also in red, we have employment-centric areas that we would expect that we would want to continue to see potential density and employment uses. And then in yellow, we have what we're calling core neighborhoods. These are areas where we want to see at least replacement with existing densities and hopefully more density in the future. Really trying to prioritize density to the center where we have jobs and we have services like transit, this sort of thing. Moving out from the core, we get into what we're calling Tier 1 land. That's the light blue. This would be the area within which we would expect that it would be somewhat easier, rather, for jurisdictions to intensify their master plan land use, right? And this has been drawn, in this case, again, with all the data we have behind all the scenario work, with all of the comments that we received, and really with the NRS in mind, that we should be promoting infill, trying to go into older established neighborhoods, limiting premature expansion, limiting sprawl. And so that is the blue line in this first draft. The gray is Tier 2 lands. This is land now which is towards the edge of the TMSA, that nowhere are we trying to suggest that you can't change these lands. It just requires more review. It requires a deeper look at why you want to change these lands. And then finally, outside the black line, we have what we're calling the rural area. And that would be the area of least density, right, that we would want to try to see happen. So that was the first rendition. After looking at this, the key to intensification, one key is capacity of infrastructure. And something we're really going to promote, and Kim's going to talk about in her part, is a public infrastructure investment plan that's coordinated among all of the infrastructure providers so that we know where in our community we have existing or planned facility upgrades that are going to allow for intensification. So if you consider that, and you also consider all of the work that we've done with regard to issues identification we've done with this body and others, we took another stab at the draft map. This is draft 2 now. And I think what you can see is that there's no changes to the core area, but the Tier 1 area has become smaller. And that is really because I don't think we want to, initially, this big blue area, that's everywhere pretty much we've developed so far today. If you take today's development and put it on there, you'll see that that blue corresponds really well. And we have facilities there. We have pipes in the ground. We've got sewer pipes. We've got roads. But we don't know as much about capacity as we'd like to. And so we thought, why don't we take what we know about regional issues identification and overlay that and kind of carve away at that Tier 1 area to try to understand where we think, without, in the absence of this thing we're proposing, which is again, a public infrastructure investment plan that's coordinated, where do we think that we can support intensification today? It's possible that this boundary should even be smaller or, should change at the margins. We need to continue to work at that. I think we'll really know what that boundary needs to be when we complete that infrastructure planning piece that's coordinated. But this is what we have right now. And really, Lauren's going to take us through the policies, but it's draft, but the idea being that we're prioritizing growth to the center, and that's in response to all the feedback we've gotten and trying to optimize our existing infrastructure and services. All right, well with that then, I will turn this over to Lauren to talk about the policies associated to the map.
All right, so in terms of regional form, Jeremy did touch on a lot of these pieces, but I'm going to reiterate and kind of get into a little bit more detail. Regional form is really a way of describing the desired pattern of growth and addresses subsections 3 and 4 of NRS. As you can see above, the objectives of subsection 3 include limiting premature expansion into undeveloped areas, preserving and revitalizing existing neighborhoods and urban areas, and directing new growth into established areas. Subsection 4 really requires that the regional plan classify land uses by density or intensity, allow for a variety of uses, and coordinates with military installations. So one of the main goals of this update specific to regional form really included refining the existing construct of the TMSA. As Jeremy described earlier, we know it has excess capacity, we know it's large. To do this, we've established the regional land designations, which you can see on the screen overhead. I'm going to describe these designations, but before I do that, I really want to point out that regional form we have depicted in the draft policies and the regional form map really get to some important facets that the community members expressed. These include maintaining open space, reducing sprawl, and growing up instead of growing out. So in terms of these regional land designations, you really have two main constructs defining regional form. That's the Truckee Meadows service area and the lands within, and then the rural area, so it's all the land outside of the existing Truckee Meadows service area. Within the Truckee Meadows service area, as Jeremy mentioned, we have the core area, we have Tier 1 lands and Tier 2 lands. And within the rural area, we have the ability for rural development areas, freestanding communities, and resort service areas. So the core area, again, is really comprised of 3 sub-areas: the mixed-use core, employment core, and the neighborhood core. And this is really where we anticipate and prioritize the highest density and intensities of growth. This is really very infill focused. In terms of Tier 1 land, Jeremy really touched on a bit of the establishment process for that tier, but generally, this was based on availability and proximity of facilities and services. We further refined it again through the issues identification work. It's anticipated that development in this area can be served more easily in Tier 1. However, it doesn't mean that there aren't issues that exist. We recognize that there may be some. The goal in creating Tier 1 was really to optimize existing infrastructure with capacity and coordinate future provision of facilities and services. Again, prioritizing growth in a more inward fashion. So Tier 2 lands are generally on the periphery. Facilities and services and information about facilities and services is generally less available. We also acknowledge that there may be issues regarding the provision of facilities and services. Thus, additional review to intensify these areas is what we're really looking for. And I want to be clear in saying that existing entitlements will still be allowed. We're really focusing on requests for intensification that will be reviewed by this body through a conformance review process. So again, the rural area is the area outside of the TMSA. This is an area in which no municipal services are anticipated. This is really comparable to the existing policies we have regarding what we called before the rural development area. However, what we did here was reduce the densities from what exists now is 1 unit per 5 acres is allowed in this area. We've actually reduced that to 1 unit per 40 acres with the ability to allow for areas that have 1 unit per 5 acres with the option to cluster. So overall, it's kind of a de-intensification is what it could look like, or that's the wrong wording. We're not allowing for increased intensification there, generally 1 per 40. But to establish a rural development area, that would come through a regional plan amendment process. So that would allow this body to make that change if wanted. We also recognize that there are freestanding communities. So these are areas that are already established. They've been established since before the creation of regional planning. And we know that they act a little bit differently. So this is areas like Gerlach or Wadsworth or Empire. So we want to recognize those areas and that they are different, even though they exist in the rural area. We also maintain the concept of the resort service area. That policy hasn't shifted much from the current regional plan. Basically, what we wanted to do is actually define the area and call it out specifically, which is the Mount Rose area. But this policy also allows for other resort areas to be established through a regional plan amendment process if one's wanted in the future. All right, so for public facilities and services, I'm going to turn it over to Kim.
Thanks very much, Lauren. So in terms of public services and facilities, what you see above you is NRS 278.0274, subsections 5 and 8. There's a lot of discussion around public facilities and services. In our NRS statutes, we have provided you with a copy of that at your seat, but we tried to do some summing up of it here, let's say. And some of the important pieces include describing the problems and needs of our area relating to public facilities and services. What facilities are going to be required? Who those providers are, and the area within which each has to serve, and also establishing the time within which those facilities and services will be necessary to support development. Okay. The final piece is a summary of yearly CIPs or capital improvement plans. I almost turned my microphone off. Okay. So when we started having conversations regarding public facilities and services, we had a couple of different thought processes around this, and I'm going to try and describe this in a couple different ways. One is a short-term conversation here and a long-term. I'm going to jump to the long-term first, so the second half of the slide. One of the things that we have consistently heard, whether it's through various surveys, I can tell you every survey we've taken, any way we ask it, infrastructure is always one of the top 2 or 3 priorities. We now have actually a study or a survey we did in November of 17 and one in December of 18. And the answer is infrastructure is still number 2 in terms of numbers 1 and 2, just depending on the survey, regarding people's interests. So part of what we talked about was this idea of a public infrastructure investment plan. And this is really the opportunity to comprehensively, as a community, describe what the problems and needs are regarding public infrastructure. We're talking about on a regional basis, identify where investments and services and facilities should be focused. The idea here is that it's going to take extensive coordination and that TMRPA is going to act as the convener if this is something that the RPC and the RPGB approve. And we also think it's going to take quite a bit of time. There's a lot of information that it's going to take a while to get. Some information we're going to need to actually even be able to create to be able to do this. We think the best idea on this is to have that plan in the work plan, the public infrastructure investment plan in our work plan, and complete prior to the next regional plan update in 5 years, so that that is the way 5 years from now that we as a community talk about investments in our infrastructure and are able to find, we are able to find conformance. So in the short term, the conversation becomes, at the moment we use concurrency. Do we want to keep concurrency or not keep concurrency? I will say that we've had, we're in the middle of really good conversations with the Regional Plan Update Working Group regarding what this looks like. In terms of concurrency, is it working? What type is working? One of the interesting conversations or interesting points that was brought up today was maybe it's not just concurrency, which is to ensure that things happen at time of building permit, but there's also a discussion about the facilities capacity in the beginning, and that actually both of those should happen. So the standards are being discussed with the working group. As I mentioned, it was a very fruitful conversation both last week and this week. We anticipate continuing that conversation next week. I would say this is one of the most complex of the policy conversations that we are having. And so while we have draft policies for you, we also anticipate having additional conversation with the working group and being able to bring that back to you. One item that is in your draft policies now, and you'll see it in red with a question mark, is the conversation around public safety. And so public safety is not an item that has previously been broached by this agency. The conversation, I think, in this round is, do we want to? By public safety, we mean both fire and police, or sheriff, depending on your jurisdiction. The conversation here really is, if facilities and specifically the service that public safety provides is such a significant portion of the budget for the 3 jurisdictions, and land use incredibly impacts the delivery of these types of services, should we as a community through TMRPA be talking about this? Should we be talking about it through the regional plan update? We're definitely interested to hear your feedback. Again, doesn't have to be tonight, but also the governing boards. We will be taking this out to the community, and we anticipate additional conversation with the working group on this. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Nate for natural resources.
Thank you, Nate Kusha, for the record. I'm going to walk you guys through our kind of natural resources section of the update and the new kind of draft policies with that. So just to reinvent the NRS and what it requires us to do with natural resources, it actually requires us to conserve, preserve, and protect the region's natural resources, limit the impact that development has on those resources in our region, and identify where those resources exist geographically. So to get started, the regional form policies that Lauren talked about earlier actually play a big role in kind of the natural resources and preservation of our region by slowing the land utilization and reducing the impacts to open space. So a lot of the kind of things we're trying to get at with preserving natural resources are inherently part of those policies as well. So just wanted to touch on that. One thing that we're doing as part of our natural resources section is to create a map of the natural resources in our area. And this is really to show kind of where these resources exist in our region, and maybe get at some of these areas of where development might not be best suited according to where these resources are. We've really tried to beef up this section. It's kind of lacking in the current plan, and we know that. It's also been a big concern of the public in all of our outreach through surveys and everything, things like maintaining open space, public lands, and open space connectivity consistently popped in the top 3 of all of our public engagement. In fact, in our quality of life survey, the natural environment ranked #1 for what makes this place a great place to live. So with that, we've tried to beef it up. One of our policies that we currently have in the regional plan, policy 2.1.1, lists natural resource items that should be addressed by master plans and other cities plans and similar plans. You can see some of those items up here. It's things like open space, ridgelines, wildland urban interface. What we've done in these draft policies is really broken up that policy into multiple policies, recognizing that each of these things are pretty important in and of themselves. They don't need to be clumped into one policy. So we made a policy to address each one of these specifically. We also, some of the policies have remained the same. We've kept things like the DCA that has worked well for us and slopes. We also plan to, at that last bullet up there, work on developing a natural resource plan. This is something that's going to take a little bit of time as well, and it's going to be in the work plan. But we want to work with our regional partners to really get these things coordinated and look at where our open space is and where our natural resources are and coordinate as a region on these items. So that's all. I'm going to turn it back over to Lauren.
All right, with regard to the regional coordination element, it really gets at subsections 6 and 7 of the NRS statute. So subsection 6 really describes the annexation programs and the RPC's role in annexations and the spheres of influence and their boundaries. And subsection 7 really discusses kind of the guidelines for conformance review and intergovernmental coordination and the communication kind of with the wider region. So some changes to policy with regard to this element include TMRPA being involved earlier in the review process. So this will allow us to provide comments and data that can be utilized then by local government staff during their analysis and review of master plan amendments and projects of regional significance. We're trying to add more value to these review processes, which is something that we heard expressed by this group in the issues identification discussions. The conformance review findings and the regional plan amendment findings are shifted a bit based on all of the new policies in the plan, as well as the idea of the cumulative impact considerations. We're really trying to tackle the cumulative impact considerations by establishing the Truckee Meadows annual report that's going to annually track and monitor items such as population growth, locations and types of development, and various housing statistics, just to name a few. So it's anticipated that we'll be able to utilize this information during the analysis of our conformance reviews. We also discussed the creation of subcommittees to discuss regional items. It's kind of a carryover policy, but it's an important aspect to really point out in terms of intergovernmental coordination, which the plan attempts to promote more of. In fact, through our surveys, the public expressed that intergovernmental relations was really a popular concern. There were also concerns about many entities being responsible for providing services and really coordinating those pieces. Interestingly, during our community conversation back in December, regional coordination actually jumped up in terms of importance. So it was really interesting to see what had happened throughout the year. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kim.
Okay, and this is the final slide of the evening. This is the timeline of engagement and next steps. So let's run through this really quickly. Draft policy release, February 13th and 14th. Obviously, 13th is tonight for the Planning Commission. Tomorrow is the Governing Board, which is the 14th. The Regional Planning Update Working Group has received these draft policies. We have not had time to have conversations regarding all of them at this point, and that is something that we are continuing to do weekly, and you can see that identified on the bottom of the slide. We are, as I mentioned, going to ask for your feedback. There's a variety of processes that you can use, and if one of the things that you might like to do is provide us written comments, we're going to ask you to do that by March 4th. Just really quickly, I'm going to run over what was at your seat so that we can chat about that. So you've got your draft plan policies to take away. You have copies of both draft 1 and draft 2 of the regional form map. We've provided you with a copy of the NRS statutes regarding the contents of the regional plan, and we've also provided you with a draft document that takes each of the NRS subsections for this organization and identifies where the draft policies, the new draft policies, whether it's population growth or regional form, what those are actually addressing. Again, this is draft, but we're trying to provide a variety of ways to take a look at it. So we'll have you take these away tonight. We will provide you with an electronic copy if you'd like to do that for your written comments. Again, we'd like those back by March 4th. You have a planning commission meeting on March 13th. So between the 15th, February 15th and March 7th, we are going to be hosting individual and group meetings for the planning commission and the governing board members to also be able to get your feedback verbally. So you have a couple of choices there. You'll talk about this at your planning commission meeting on the 13th, at which point in time we'll share with you some of the feedback that we've received. We're suggesting a special governing board meeting either the 21st or the 28th to then share your conversation on the 13th with them and any additional comments that we've received. We then expect that we will have a second draft of these policies with all of this input, and we are looking to host a community conversation for the public in early April. We will also be taking this information out to various groups. We would like to be able to make sure that we go to the neighborhood advisory boards, citizen advisory boards, various others. So that's what this timeline of engagement looks like. As I mentioned, I also sent an email describing these things. At this point, this is the end of the presentation. Again, draft information, but really looking forward to having you engage with this and work with this. Staff has spent a lot of time researching and developing policies and trying to think about things in a new way. And with that, we are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much to Kim and Lauren and Nate and Jeremy and all of the team for putting together that presentation and all the information that we have tonight. Questions? Initial feedback, initial responses.
Once again, their hard work shows. Yes. They really put forth in that. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Spilczyk, yeah.
Thank you. In reference when you mentioned red for fire and law enforcement, is that in the draft policies?
That's correct. That's in
Because it's
the,
not red in there.
I apologize. We must have printed it in black
Yeah,
and
in
white.
black and white.
It was red in my copy.
All
I
right.
apologize.
Are you aware that there are numerous studies that have been done on regionalization of services that could be a reference point?
Am I aware of various regional studies regarding regionalization of certain services? Yes. If you would like to talk more specifically, because maybe I don't know all of them, I'm happy to do that.
Specifically on fire, there was, within the last 5 years or so, there was a Blue Ribbon Commission regarding regionalization of fire services.
That one I am aware of. Thank you.
Commissioner Fewens again. I would like to see the draft form maybe, if it been sent to our individual jurisdiction staff and see what their comments are. Mainly my thought of that is, I consider myself a citizen planner, which is meaning I'm not a planner that is, but so I heavily rely upon my jurisdiction's staff and what they usually come forth with. And so when I would like to see it final report, I would like definitely to see what our different jurisdiction planning staff has. And then second of all, just kind of our stakeholders and our community partners like the Association of General Contractors and BAN and different things like that. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Kim, in terms of structuring our feedback, not only for the March 4th meeting, but looking forward to the March 13th meeting, is there, a particular format or set of information that would be most helpful? I mean, are you looking for feedback on certain things that might be missing, things that, can you give us a little bit more guidance in terms of how to structure our feedback so it's most efficient for you? Because I know this is a quick timeline.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for that question. If you're interested in providing us written comments, and that includes obviously electronically, we will be providing you with that document, and we would ask that you provide those in comments. so that you provide them off to the side so that we can see kind of what all of those are. If you are able to meet with us and we get your information verbally, we will be responsible for actually bringing, taking that in and writing that down. So we can do both of those things. In terms of what we're looking for, I don't think any of us are going to say, good feedback is good feedback. Are we interested in hearing, did we miss something? Is something workable, not workable? Are there concerns that, as you read it, are raised? We know that all of those would be very welcome. We know that the format of it has changed. So in terms of the description of regional form versus regional coordination, it's possible that things you're used to seeing together maybe live in different sections. But we're more than happy to have that conversation with you and guide you through that.
Thank you. Kim, my last question is just it's a nomenclature question. So in the existing regional plan, we have goals, objectives, policies.
That is correct.
So what prompted the change, I guess, and what are, I see these are policies. So what happened to the goals?
So part of what you do not have this evening is, and we described it ahead of each, is that before each section there's going to be a narrative description that describes what those goals are and what it is that we're interested in. But I will say that it looks like Lauren also has something to say on this, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
You gave me the eyes, so I thought that was my turn to talk. So in regards to the goals, we did have goals adopted for the Regional Planning Governing Board. They are more broad than the goals you're used to seeing in the plan as it exists now. The goals in the plan as it exists now are pretty specific. They're then implemented by the policies. So that piece specifically, I guess, has been removed, but there still are overall goals for the plan itself. It's just not in the document yet that you have.
Right.
These are specifically the policies.
But they will be in that narrative piece in front of
Correct.
each section, whether it's regional form, population growth.
Yeah, and in terms of the objectives, we were really aiming again at tying everything back and re-embedding back to NRS. So in terms of what NRS states, those specific objectives really come from the NRS discussion and what it is that we're trying to tackle when we're tackling a policy and how it relates to NRS.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation. Other questions or feedback? Well, I guess you'll look forward to everyone's comments and feedback in the next couple weeks then.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Childs.
I, for one, would like the electronic copy.
Ditto.
We'll provide it to everyone.
Do we need to take, no, we did public comment on this item, right?
We did not.
We did not?
Mr. Chair, we did not do public comment. At the time, we did not have any comments. Let's see if we do.
We still do not for this item.
Okay, anyone wishing to make a public comment on the item? Okay, covered that. Do we need any sort of a motion or?
You do not need to
Just
take any action
informational?
this evening.
Okay.
But thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. I need to find my agenda here. Thank you. Thanks. So we'll move on then to item 6, which is members and directors reports.
Mr. Chair, I have nothing additional to what I have already identified this evening.
Thank you. Legal counsel report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jessica Prenning for the record. I have nothing more to say tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I did have one.
Oh, we need to go back then. Well, we didn't close the item, so we're still on 6.
Thank you. I apologize, Mr. Chair. I know that at the last Planning Commission meeting, the request was made regarding the presentation on sewer. I have spoken to management at all 3 jurisdictions. The conversation is to have a joint presentation here, both at the Planning Commission and also at the Governing Board. Your Governing Board members have asked for the same thing, so I am working on putting that together, and like I said, it would be a joint presentation across the 3 jurisdictions. Thank you.
Do we know when that'll be?
I'm working on it right now. I would love to be able to try to get it for our March 13th meeting.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
If I
Commissioner
can just ask that Kim get that information out, at least to the city of Reno, early so that we can mention it to our other commissioners, and they could possibly come as citizens that night and sit in the audience. I'm sure that Washoe County would like to be involved in that, and Sparks also, since it's equally affecting us. But it might be a good time for all of our commissions or commissioners to be, receive that presentation.
Great point. Item 7 then, requests for future agenda items. Okay, seeing none, public comment?
Yes, 3 this evening, Wesley Griffin, then Kim Tracy, then Tammy Holdstill.
Hello again. In reference to item 5C, we didn't know exactly when to come up and give our public comment, but we wanted to make a suggestion in reference to item 5C that the presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding amending and adopting the guidelines for definition of projects of regional significance to address the development of land for primary, secondary, or post-secondary schools. This has been postponed, is my understanding, that we're going to wait for some further discussion between yourselves, or your staffs, and Washoe County school staff. We would like to ask you to include some members of the public. We had a situation where, with regard to Wild Creek, this was suddenly foisted upon us that now this was going to happen. And one of the comments we had at one of the RSCVA meetings is that why wasn't there maybe some further study? Pete Eckhart had said publicly, when somebody asked him about other plans, he says, there is no plan B. I mean, this is such a great idea, there is no plan B. Well, the comment was made at that meeting that if you were going to propose a project of $200 million and you were in a private company and you hadn't even looked at plan B, you'd probably get fired. So one of the things that suddenly happened was that now suddenly we were going to do due diligence. And so Pete Eckert decided that he would have a due diligence plan. And it was really kind of a due diligence plan that was after the fact. Well, when he was talking about it at one of these meetings, I asked him, I said, well, could you include some people, from the public to maybe look at some other areas, some of the other areas that you're looking at? Because we had quite a few. And he said no. And when the due diligence plan came out, the only people that gave input into that due diligence plan was employees of Washoe County School District and contractors who had financial interest in this. So lo and behold, what kind of a due diligence plan do we come up with? We come up with things that Wild Creek is the very best. They look at areas, they didn't look at all the areas. So is it wrong to try to get the best information to make these decisions on? I would ask that you would include some members, some citizens, some members of the public to maybe come in and give some comment. Obviously, we can't control it, but at least you could hear what we have to say. So I would make that request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Kim Tracy, and then after that, Tammy Holdstill.
Hi, Kim Tracy again, and I'm probably going to sound a little bit like an echo here, but I too was going to ask that some of us citizens, particularly those of us who are being especially affected by this latest project of the Wild Creek School, be allowed to attend that meeting as well so that we too can be educated. I'd like to see it happen sooner than later. I know you said that there wasn't any restriction on a time frame. The reason I say this is because it seems to me that if the regional plan at this point doesn't include anything that can oversee protecting the open space that we have now with regard to this school, then I would like to see the schools be PRS That seems to make the most sense to me. You know, Mr. Etchert clearly does not want schools to be PRS. And again, I will say, I don't understand that completely, because it seems to me that the goal should be to build the schools in the most sensible, logical places that will have value and longevity in their value. And I don't know why he would not welcome the extra scrutiny to make sure that that happens. This should not be a personal agenda for anybody. It should be about where the best location is in conjunction with maintaining our open spaces. So we would like to be included in the meeting as citizens, and citizens that are directly affected by this project. And we would like to see it happen sooner than later, so that this agency, who seems to be the only agency who offers any hope at us maintaining some sort of our open space, and can help, and maybe at least see if it is done, that it is done correctly, and some open spaces maintained. We've been told certain things, and they have not come to pass more than once. And some of these meetings were at our private meetings where Mr. Etchert was invited, and so, you know, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be included in learning what we can learn and all having some input. And I thank you for everything that you're doing to oversee taking care of our community. I grew up north of here, and so this has been kind of like my home area. And then I lived in Denver for years, and I have to say that at the prospect of coming back to this area, the one thing that really made it difficult for me is, after living in Denver, I loved the city there because there was so much green open space. And the one thing I've always said about the Reno-Sparks area is that it's so lacking in that. And I understand that we're high desert, but there's no reason that we can't have those green, beautiful spaces in certain areas. And when we have them, to destroy them seems sort of criminal to me. So hopefully this agency is pretty dedicated to maintaining what we have and making sure that we have more to look forward to in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments.
And final one for this item that I have is Tammy Holtstill.
Thank you.
Tammy Holtstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee, for the record. I sat back tonight to listen, and some of the things I was going to say now has already been stated, that you have stakeholders. You have the cities and the county, but you also have the residents, and the residents need to be included. Whether it is this plan, whether it's regarding sewer, and the sewers have stormwater, so I would say that that would be a sewer stormwater issue, not just sewers. Also the school, you know, those people that live in that area are stakeholders, and they should be involved. Instead of having something stuck there, it's part of infill, granted, but is it infill in the right location? Like I said before, the NRSs make you the mothership, and you should take that responsibility and do the right things. It needs to be done. Development in areas and intensifying when it's not meant to be there, not like Danny showed, building in floodplains. Building in floodplains, it comes back to haunt you every single time. I think that's shown it down by Sparks River, down by the river in Sparks, in the industrial area. You have built in the floodplain. Of course, you built those properties up, but it still seems to come back. Out where we're at, all of us residents, my husband's home, when he bought it 45 years ago, was 10 feet out of the floodplain. We are now 2. Why is that? Because of all the infill that has happened there with all of the effluent, and then trying to store water on top of that in the ground so that water can't go away. There's issues all over the place, and you, as regional board, need to be looking at all of those and saying, no, that's not right. It's time to stop with the greed. You have plenty, as it showed up there, you have plenty of, within the McCarran ring pretty much, that you have room to do the right things with. But until you guys take care of sewer and stormwater, I think you've got a problem all the way around. So there's a lot of things that need to be looked at before you guys just keep building. It's time to sit back and tell the developers, I don't see this working out right. Need to do something different. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make a public comment on our general public comment item? Okay, thanks for those comments. We'll move on then to written correspondence. Okay, thank you, and I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.